How many of you have seen this book? There's only two of them in existence. One of them is in the Historical Society Museum, and there's this one. And this one lives most of the time in my office. And I would invite all of you I would welcome anyone who wants to check this out and take it home and read it. This is 100 years of history. It goes up to about 1998, starts in 1901. And I'd like to encourage our board to pick up the last 2 decades and maybe call it the new millennium or something like that and keep this history alive. But it's interesting, if you go back through this book, last Saturday was the Women's March all over, everywhere. All but about 30 pages in this book are activities of the Women's Aid Society and the Women's Fellowship. The church board did very little. It was all the guys being important and making those executive decisions. The women held this place together for 120 years. Bake sale made $8.30, gave $2 to the minister and $6 to the power company, and saved $3 to buy refreshments for the next, or decorations for the next Women's Aid Society event. It's amazing. 8 families, 13 people started this church. They got together in 1900. This church was an offshoot, a satellite church of the Sebastopol Congregational Church of Christ. And they asked permission to the Northern California Council of Congregational Churches of Christ to be a satellite for 1 year. In March of 1901, they said, okay. So they had their first meeting, their first service down in the back of what's now Arches Glass. It was a feed store then. First meeting. Within that year, they said, we don't want to be a satellite anymore. We are our own peoples. And they became their own peoples. 5 years later, they bought this lot. This is lot number 7 in some plat for $100. The next 2 lots that the hall and the cottage are on, they bought in 1906 for $10 because they were choice property. The street out here wasn't West Sierra, it was Stony Point. And West School Street, East School Street that goes over in front of City Hall, that was actually Roblar Road back in the day. But let's put this kind of commitment these people had in some perspective. They started off with 8 families and started a church. 5 years later, they had 12 families. And they bought this piece of property for $100. Within 1 year, those 12 families built this building. One of the families had a standard redwood up in Boonville. They went up and cut the trees, loaded them on wagons and mules, and hauled it up to Fort Bragg, had all the wood milled, all this fancy wood, all milled. Then they brought it all the way down from Fort Bragg with wagons and teams and built this all in less than a year with no power tools. 3 years later, they went through the same exercise and built the hall. So if we put this in perspective, are there 16, maybe 20? Well, actually there's over 20 people. Would you all care to get together today and make the commitment of donating all the materials to build these 2 buildings over the next 3 years and donate all the materials and all of the labor to build them and not use power tools? Yeah, it's okay. You can use power tools if you want. It's all right. Who's got that kind of commitment? What? Life was maybe simpler then. Couldn't have been easier. I mean, the first bathrooms here were outside. That's not easier. There were no fast foods. There was no Mickey D's. There were no processed foods. You could just go down to the store and pop a can and throw it in the microwave. Families were much larger then. Lots more kids to feed, lots more clothes to make. What kind of commitment did those people have to donate all this lumber, all this time, to build these two buildings? And look at this building. There were 13 people that started this church. Then they had 20. They built these buildings with a lot more vision than seating 20 people, than taking care of their present need. This hall over here in 1919, maybe, I don't remember the year, but it was somewhere around there. The city school, which is where City Hall is now, burned down. The Women's Society of Katahdin and Church of the Oaks supplied what is now Mir Shalom and our hall for the city schools for like 5 years until they rebuilt the school. What kind of commitment does that take from a community? It takes the same kind of commitment that we show when the north end of our town gets burned up and there's homeless people. You come together, you feed them, you somehow get them clothed and housed. That's what communities do. Another interesting little note. I started coming here 20 years ago. And I think there are only 2 people in this room today that were here when I was here, when I started coming. That's Bonnie and Kelly. When I came, they asked me to be on the board. I said, okay. And I was elected to be a trustee. And the trustees were guys because they did the work stuff. The deacons were the girls. They sat around and talked about stuff and told the guys what to do. Not much has changed. But there were 2 gentlemen, and as I look back, neither one of them were on the board. One was Bill Eckert and the other one was Cecil Dixon. They were both in their 70s. And every week, they would mow all of the grass, the front and the backyard, take care of all the roses, and they mowed the grass with an 18-inch push reel mower. Well, I was going to help these old guys out. I mowed half the backyard and had to quit. I had blisters and I was beat to death. And they did it every single week, year round, year after year after year. Bill Eckert used to be with the Parks Department down in LA. They named a park after him. But he kept the roses like Gene keeps the roses. And one time we had an outdoor tea in the front yard. And somebody from Luther Burbank Gardens came. They said, how big is your gardening staff? Well, it's one old guy that's kind of cranky most of the time. He takes care of the roses. You don't mess with the roses. He'll tell you what for and how much. Wow, your roses are prettier than ours at Luther Burbank Gardens. Today, We are fortunate to have people like Jean and Tricia and some others take care of our flowers. But we pay someone to mow the grass. Different type of commitment. Not good, not bad, just different. Different level of commitment. We all give and we all share in the responsibilities of our ownership and our membership and our participation in this church. We've been given a huge legacy. Huge. I'm going to ask each of us, think about our commitment. You know, we only ask when you join here to commit to sharing your time and your talent and your thought and your treasure. As we break bread together, or break dishes, whatever that might be, and we participate in our annual meeting, I encourage each of us, me included, to give some thought to this thing called commitment. I was talking to James yesterday. I said, thank you so much for your help. Wow. He said, it makes me feel so good to do stuff. You know, we have a certain amount of responsibility to, pay the bills, write checks. We don't harp on it much, but that's truly a responsibility in this day and age. It takes money. But the real circle, the real flow, is when we give of ourselves. We get out there and cut those roses back, rake those leaves, clean house. Another thing we didn't have 20 years ago, we didn't have a janitor. We took care of it. But all of us have less discretionary time, even us old farts that are retired. We have less discretionary time, it seems, to share ourselves. That's the way it would appear. But there's just as much time in your life to devote to whatever you choose to devote it to as you choose to do. Every one of us has the privilege of deciding what we're going to do today, how we're going to do it. Are we going to do it out of obligation? Are we going to do it out of giving and gratitude? So today, let's all participate in maybe having some vision for our future, thinking about more than our present needs. Are we going to be able to make our budget? What about the next 100 years? Wouldn't it be great if we had the vision? And I know we do, but if we looked for the vision to accommodate the congregation that's going to be sitting here in 2119. We have that vision within us. We have that wisdom. We have that love. We just need to dig it out. We need to find it. And then the magic thing, we need to do it. "119 years. Been through wars and fires, and there were a lot of resignations in here. somebody got a little twisted out of shape. There's an interesting thing I saw, 1962 maybe. They determined to raise the rent on the Rose Cottage. The minister moved out, didn't live there. The minister resigned, went somewhere else. The new minister didn't want to live in that place. They decided to rent it out. And in 1961, the rent was $180. They sent a notice to the rent board of Cotati. I didn't know there was one, but evidently then there was, and asked for permission to raise the rent to $195 a month. Yeah. And they rented it to some young people. And this was back in the 60s. One morning there was a headline in the Press Democrat: Church of the Oaks parsonage raided by the drug squad, found marijuana gardens growing in the attic. And if you would all like to take a tour, we could go up in the attic. The grow room's still there. So if any of you need a place, it might be available. This old place has been through a lot. Seen marriages and divorces, births, used to do baptisms, funerals, memorials, all these different facets of life. But the most important accomplishment of all of the people that have walked through those doors was their commitment to keep this a special place, a true heritage of this community and the people who built it. And I hope our commitment is to continue that. We can do it if we choose to. Vision, imagination. Let's sing about imagination and see what we can come up with as far as imagination as we create the future of this community heritage called Church of the Oaks. And so it is.